Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Granick-Allen. Election day is just a few days away, and this will be our last panel before the election. There's so much to distill in this last show. We'll cover last week's debates, recent polling and election day predictions, the mail-in ballot expectations, yet another candidate being dropped from the roster, and Jody Wilson-Raybould's new book and what that might mean, or maybe nothing, for Justin Trudeau. Well, joining us now to help unpack it all is Elliot Hughes, Senior Advisor with Summa Strategies and former advisor to Liberal Finance and Defence Ministers, and David Clement, North American Affairs Manager for the Consumer Choice Centre and former research assistant to the Canadian Research Chair in International Human Rights. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's just dive right in and unpack it all. So the debates, I take it both of you watched them last week. What did you think? We started with the French, and then we went quickly to the English the very next day. Elliot, were there any winners, losers, takeaways?
Start with the loser. I think it was the Canadian electorate and Canadian voters. I don't think we really got as much as people were hoping for out of those debates. I know the debate commission has tried to reformat things to try and make it a little bit different than past years and more buy-in from the parties and the party leaders and hopefully to get more voters interested. I don't know if we're quite there yet. I think we still have a little bit of work to do on that. The first French language debate hosted by TVA, I thought was really great and probably the best one. It's this sort of face-to-face format, which seemed to work a lot better.
Yes.
The English format and the English debate that we had last Thursday was particularly, I would say, brutal and tough, and really didn't allow Canadians to hear and see from each of the leaders what their plan for Canada was, which is unfortunate.
Yes, because generally, apart from your little media sound bites and your the press releases, really it is the debate where people kind of focus in their attention. They say, okay, we'll dedicate this 2 hours. We'll find out who we like, what they're saying, and kind of make up our minds on who to vote for from that. David, did you have a similar sentiment as Elliot? Did you think the Canadian electorate lost here?
So I do. And it leaves me scratching my head because it's not that hard to get this right. Just give the major broadcasters each one national televised debate. And let them handle this and figure out the format and how it's going to be set up. So you'd have one French debate and likely 3 English debates. I think that's probably the way it should be moving forward, and they can tweak the setup of it. In regards to the English debate, yes, the Canadian electorate lost, but I think the ultimate losers from the debate, and this is, in my opinion, it's pretty shameful, is religious minorities in Quebec. Because when Mr. Blanchet was pressed about Bill 21, he rather cleverly pointed around the stage and said that they were all pretty much in agreement in regards to that law or in regards to whether or not the federal government should intervene. And that was a pretty shameful moment for me as a Canadian to watch all of our party leaders either sit on their hands or openly defend what I would consider literal systemic racism. And so that was a big problem for me.
Okay, interesting you brought up Quebec. And okay, so one thing about Bill 21, and I don't support Bill 21. I think we did a whole show about that because I stand for religious minorities, and I feel Bill 21 really encroaches on religious freedom and freedom of expression there. But most Canadians forgot about Bill 21. That was a thing that was featured in the last election 2 years ago. And I found it very interesting that it came up in this debate. Very little attention paid to foreign affairs, very little, even climate change. I guess climate change, we did have quite a few segments in the English one, not so much with the French, but, there were so many other issues. But then here comes Bill 21 kind of eclipsing. And, whether I agree with him or not, I have to say, Mr. Blanchet, he did a phenomenal job handling what was perceived to be a very aggressive line of questioning from the moderator. And the moderator really was playing such a prominent role. Do you think Canadians still really care about Bill 21? Is this still a big deal, David?
It is for this Canadian.
It is.
That's anecdotal. And a lot of people were critical of the moderator for the line of questioning. I think that she should have been harder. She should have asked Mr. Blanchet to explain to Anglophone Canadians why his colleague, Jagmeet Singh, should be disqualified from being a teacher because of his turban. That would have been, I think, the appropriate question to really highlight the absurdity.
Okay, I'm going to pause you there. We've got to cut to commercial, but I want to pick up out in Quebec when we return. Okay, we're picking up our discussion with our election panel. We have Elliot Hughes and David Clement joining us. David, just before the break, we're talking about Bill 21 and whether that's still pressing on Canadian minds. I know that's an issue for you. What could have been handled differently at the debate on that issue?
I mean, I just would have loved to have seen someone take a step forward and do what would have been electorally damaging in Quebec and say, no, you know what, this is a terrible law. And we would use the tools at the disposal of the federal government to fight it. Is it still a hot topic and a pressing issue? It certainly is in Quebec in regards to those who disagree with me. But I do think that it fits into the conversation that we're talking about in regards to Indigenous reconciliation, how minorities are treated in this country. And it is fitting if you look at it in that context of the conversations that we've had both prior to COVID and during COVID, really for what's been this minority government.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second. I mean, this is an interesting circumstance. I don't know any other, well, definitely not in North America, jurisdiction where you have a national debate and there's one of the participants who's literally only representing one area or one province of the country or one state. So he advocated. I mean, Bill 21 is wildly popular in Quebec. It enjoys a plurality of popularity. And that works for Quebec. I don't agree with it. I think there are things that should be done with it. And I don't agree with Bill 21 whatsoever. However, that's what they choose. Democracy is 50% plus one. Elliot, is the silence from the other parties, as David suggests, is it because they're vying for those coveted Quebec seats? Is that the right place for them to jump in and start telling Quebec what they ought to do?
Well, it certainly is because the way they're reacting is because of they're vying for those Quebec seats, and those are really important seats. I would tend to agree with where David was on this, but what's interesting to me is the politics here. So you've got Blanchet was running, I would say, a mediocre campaign to that point.
Yes.
He was, he can be an arrogant guy, and I think that was coming across in the campaign. But this all of a sudden has really whipped up a hornet's nest in Quebec, and he has taken this and in recent poll numbers has seemed to have sort of closing the gap with the Liberals who are leading in Quebec. So he's now been able to wrap himself around this issue along with Bill 96, which talks to the charter around the French language in Quebec, and is really sort of pushing those themes for him politically, and it's given him a bit of life. So again, going back, this is back to this debate format where off the top of the debate, the moderator was asking these really, really, sort of antagonistic questions in a sense, and led in to Mr. Blanchet with this line of questioning. And whenever someone accuses you of being racist, which was essentially what the moderator was doing to Mr. Blanchet, you're going to get this visceral reaction. And I think he's taken that and he's carried it. Whether it's right or wrong, we can have sort of debate that. I mean, what it is politically, because we're looking at September 20th in a couple of days. What's it going to mean at the ballot box? And was this this bolt of lightning that is going to allow him to perhaps recover from a lackluster start to the campaign?
No, I think your observations are bang on, and I tend to agree. Mm-hmm. In fact, I would say that he was probably, or Quebec was the biggest winner. I also was impressed with Annamie Paul. I really enjoyed the way she carried herself, the way she presented herself. At one point, she gave a barb, I think, to Justin Trudeau, accusing him of being a false feminist. And, I thought, wow, here's a woman we haven't heard very much from in the national scene. She's been accused of just campaigning in her local riding, just to reduce her carbon footprint and whatnot. But here we saw her really kind of come alive on a federal scene, on a national stage, and show that, here I am, and I'm here, and I have some really strong ideas. And I was impressed with her. I didn't know what to expect, and I thought, hey, I kind of liked what she had to say.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought her personal story is compelling, and I think she is exactly the kind of politician that we should want to have in Canada. Unfortunately, I think she actually missed a golden opportunity, which was to put some meat on the Green Party policy bone. This is probably the most attention she's going to receive throughout the campaign. Well, it definitely is.
Right.
And I think she missed her chance to really tell Canadians, what does the Green Party stand for? I think if you ask 100 Canadians what they think the Green Party stands for, they'll probably say the environment and climate change. But they have a lot more than that. And that was an opportunity for her, a missed opportunity, I think, where she could speak directly to Canadians, gather them around the Green Party ideas, and see if she might be able to pick up a couple seats across the country.
Okay, fair point. We're going to continue this just when we get back from this commercial break. Welcome back. This is our last election panel before the election on September 20th. And joining me is Elliot Hughes and David Clement. Just before the break, we're trying to kind of wrap up the discussion of what happened at the debate. David, did you want to chime in with something?
Yeah, I think that Elliot's take on the missed opportunity for the Green Party is accurate. And it's accurate in large part because for so long, the Green Party very much represented the protest vote, the none of the above vote, in many instances. And they were first to talk really seriously about climate. That became part of their brand and their banner. But in my opinion, they relied on that protest vote, and they don't have that anymore. The protest vote goes elsewhere, and in many instances to the PPC. And I'm seeing internal polling rumors that something along the lines of 25% of those who say they're going to vote PPC voted Green in the last election.
Right.
And so we're seeing the disenfranchised, the irritated, the people who are not happy with the options in front of them, moving from the traditional choice of the Green Party to the PPC.
So let's talk about that protest vote where people want to park their vote if they're upset. You know, I've said this from weeks on end, and I remember even exchanging this with my husband. I said, I think the PPC is this wild card here, and I think they're going to cause an upset, and what capacity we'll have to see on election night. But you know, we've seen their numbers surge. They're in double digits in the prairies, at times in Alberta, in different areas in rural Alberta. You know, you're right when recent polling suggested that 25% of voters for the PPC in this election, as you said, David, voted Green in the last election. You know, where do these voters come from? This has been the conundrum. Where do the voters come from? Who is parking their vote with the PPC? This is a new party. It's not like they had this big base on which to draw from. Elliot, what are the surprises that you're seeing from the PPC?
Well, it's surprising how strong they are polling, and I've seen polls from 5 to 11%, so quite a large swing. But I think it's undeniable that they are going to be a factor on the 20th. How big a factor, I think, is to be determined, and we'll have to wait and see. But what I would say in a low voter turnout election, that increases the chances of them having an outsized role in more ridings. So, there's not a lot of people paying a close attention in this election. It started in the summer. Kids are going back to school. Families are busy. We'll see how voter turnout is. I don't expect it to be super high. And so all of a sudden you get these strange splits in ridings across the country where the PPC vote, either they pull away from the Conservatives to allow the Liberals to go ahead, or do they pull away from the Conservatives to allow the NDP to go ahead? How does that play out on a larger scale? My sense is they're playing in probably about 10 to 20 seats. And that, frankly, in an election this close could really mean a lot.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Don't forget, recent polling puts the national parties, the CPC and the Liberals, so the Conservatives and Liberals, fairly neck and neck and pretty much across the board. And I always think back, okay, well, what position were the polls in as we head into the election day in 2019? And, there was an election where the Conservatives were ahead 1.2% on election day. And the result, we had Andrew Scheer, then leader of the Conservative Party, win the popular vote, but did not win the plurality of seats.
And that's mostly because the Conservative Party for a long time has had very poor voter efficiency. And so when you win...
What does that mean, voter efficiency?
So to put it bluntly, in a first-past-the-post system, realistically, in any particular riding, you need 42%, you're guaranteed to win. So when you get 78% in Fort McMurray, that's fantastic. But everything over 42%, I'm probably being a little generous. They're not wasted votes. It's important for people to vote. But those votes count towards the popular vote,
Right.
but they do nothing in regards to helping the Conservatives gain seats elsewhere. And so when I see the PPC's numbers in the prairies in Alberta, if they take 20% off the Conservatives in Fort Mac, the Conservatives still win quite easily. If they take 10% off the Conservatives in Oakville, North Burlington, well, then this riding is out of reach.
Right.
And the same goes for much of the surrounding area in the 905 as well. And so I think that's really where we have to see, does that message resonate with suburban voters in Southern Ontario? I'm not sure. I'm not really convinced yet. But maybe we'll be wrong. Maybe there will be some of those ridings where you have candidates with the PPC at 7, 8, 9%. And that's really where they become a problem.
Okay, we're going to continue this discussion in just a few moments. Welcome back. Last election panel before that big election day on September 20th. And again, joining me, Elliot Hughes and David Clement. And I guess I'm going to be that person who said, I told you so, I told you so. But I think I will be that person on election night, because I still very much believe that it will be the PPC that's going to be this wild card factor. You mentioned, David, 10 to 20 seats. I think it'll be closer to 20, frankly, that they might be that divider. Maybe I'm swelling those numbers too much. Elliot, what do you think? How do you think the PPC will factor, especially in Ontario, when we see them, almost touching that 10% ceiling?
Yeah, that's going to be one of the storylines to watch on election night for sure. And I think you've obviously also picked the right province to talk about in Ontario. Huge number of seats. This is where the Conservative or Liberal win is going to happen. There are probably, 15 to 20 swing ridings in Ontario that are really going to tell the tale here. There's a fight between Liberals and NDP in some of those, but mostly it's a Liberal-Conservative fight. You've got that 905 area that's going to be very difficult terrain for both those parties and very close. Some outskirts of Ottawa, Eastern Ontario, and there. That is really going to be where viewers and where sort of election watchers need to pay attention to on election night, because those are some of the ridings where, particularly in Eastern Ontario, you may have that higher PPC vote. And then that's where things are going to get very interesting. But at the end of the day, what's going to matter for each of those parties, and what all that matters now, and all everything that the parties are focused on, is that get out the vote effort. Which started this past weekend with the advance polls and will continue on to election day on Monday, the 20th.
Okay. A couple little things that could maybe provide upsets or maybe throw off. I think at this point, a majority probably seems out of, we'll talk about that, out of reach. A couple candidates canceled. We had the Conservatives cancel, I use the word cancel, but Lisa Robinson and Beaches East York, both in Ontario, and Raj Saini. We didn't talk about this last week, but he's been withdrawn. But their names are still on the ballot, so I don't know if that will actually make a difference in those ridings. Who knows? They may still, I don't think she has a shot, but Raj Saini could very well get reelected.
I think what we're seeing in the Kitchener riding is a bit of a surge to the Greens for those who don't want to still vote for him, which is totally understandable given the extent of the allegations. And I don't blame the Conservative Party for dumping their candidate either. She retweeted something in support of murdering imams, and it was just really ugly stuff.
Yeah, but one thing I found weird on that is that she swore an affidavit and reported to police that this was some fraudulent account that was impersonating her. So it seems like there has to be an investigation into this. But I mean, the fact that she stepped down, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, maybe, and it would be a real shame if that's the case. But I can certainly still understand why the party doesn't have the opportunity with so few days before the election to have the appearance of having someone like that representing them. So that would be a real shame if that is the case, if someone was just impersonating her and this is all a hoax.
Whether or not that turns out to be true, I have no idea. But yeah, I think, certainly appropriate for both of those two candidates to get bumped. Some serious allegations or misconduct.
Okay, let's
both
talk
sides.
about. We only have a minute. So let's talk about someone who's not running this time. Former Liberal MP, now independent MP, then did not seek re-election. Jody Wilson-Raybould. Her book just landed. We only have, unfortunately, 30 seconds here, but she makes these allegations that she suggests that Trudeau wanted her to lie. This lands the week before Election Day. Elliot, is this going to have an impact as voters go to the polls?
I don't think so. I think the Jody Wilson-Raybould story is already baked in. This was discussed and debated in the House a long time ago, and it feels awfully convenient that she's releasing her book a couple days before the election campaign is over.
Just a last comment from each of you. Any predictions on Election Day? Maybe I'll start with you, David, and we'll finish off with Elliot. David, what's your prediction? What can we expect? Well, who's going to win?
I think a slim Liberal minority.
Okay, Elliot, what do you think?
I think a slightly reduced Liberal minority from where we are today.
Okay. Well, we'll see you all on September 20th when we finally digest the polls on this final election, the 44th, September 20th. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you.
And one final note, don't forget to go to the polls, your last chance, September 20th, this Monday. For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.